You're known for being your own harshest critic. What's your perspective on what you achieved on Wardenclyffe Tower?
I think the albums, I've always thought, with the exception of road games really, I think I've always thought that the albums were pretty much representative of that particular point in time, you know. But the problems that I had with Wardenclyffe Tower was the fact that the album was recorded a long time before it was mixed. It was recorded over a year prior to releasing it. And the reason for that was we recorded it and then the scheduling was such that I could never get to mix it. I started to mix it one time and then I was really, wasn't happy with the mixes and so I stopped and then we went out on the road. Then when we came back, I tried again and I went to a studio that I usually go to, a Front Page in Costa Mesa, and I mixed it there pretty quick, and I thought it was going okay, and then later on, after I listened to them, I wasn't happy with them, so I didn't release it, and I was going to do it again, and then actually, because of the amount of time that had gone by, I started to get really fed up, you know, with the fact that I was getting to be tired of it really. So I decided that having played the mixes to friends and the other guys, to release the mixes that I'd done at Front Page, which is how the album is now. But I wasn't 100% happy with the mixes, no. It's just certain, you know, if you go to a new room, like for example Secrets, I mixed that album at home, and I spent a lot of time on the mixing, not so much. Well, it's different when you do it at home because you don't have to watch the clock. So obviously I can take time. I can take longer over things, over making decisions, and rather than do that, I just decided to go to the studio at that time with Wardenclyffe Tower because I didn't have my home setup working because we'd moved. So I wasn't able, otherwise I would have tried it. I mean, I would have tried to do it at home again, but I didn't have a setup going, you know, because we moved house and moved area and everything, and I kind of lost the setup that I had, so I had to start again. It was what it is, you know. I think the album's pretty good. I would have liked to have mixed a couple of the tracks again. Not everything. Some of them were pretty good as they were, but there was a couple of tracks that needed, you know, that I wasn't happy with. No, I think it's you know, I like some of the music on it, and I thought all the guys played really great on it. I think, like I said, the only thing that for me let it down was the mix.
Give me some more insight into the creative and recording process behind the album.
Well, I never really have a concept for an album as a whole. I usually treat each piece. Whenever I'm working on a piece of music, I'll just be working on that, and I never think about the concept of the album. I just think about writing tunes and then trying to find a balance, you know, between the tunes to make up an album. So when I come up with an album title, this has been true of every album I've ever done, I think is I don't generally think of it as a whole. I think of it as, I do think of it sonically and everything, you know, and like making sure the balance between, you know, the types of tracks, you know, how they sound one after another. Titles are always been just related really just to one piece, to one song. Take one piece of music and say, okay, that's, you know, I think that's a good title, so I'll use that. And then the album ends up being called that. It wasn't a concept for the whole record, but I try and balance all the pieces of music within one record to make it as a whole. It's not like I don't think about that. It's just that the title is not, you know, I never really have an album concept based on a title. I mean, I think each piece of music, the way it turned out pretty much the way I wanted it, with the exception of the way it was mixed, which is important to me, but I mean, they weren't so bad that it wasn't recognizable. You know, there were only fine points that I would have changed, you know, because I carried a tape around of the mixes that I had. Even started out thinking, you know, oh geez, I shouldn't have done that, I should have done this, or whatever. after I'd spent time listening to the tape, and I got used to it. And then that was one of the decisions that I made about not going back to do it again, was that I got so used to hearing it as it actually was that I couldn't, I didn't know if it was going to be actually worth doing it again. Usually what I like to do is work constantly on something until it's the way I want it, and then release it. Then I never worry about it again, because I always try and I'm not very good at working to a deadline. In fact, I'm terrible at it. That's what's going on right now. I've got this stuff I'm supposed to do by a certain date, and to me that whole concept just doesn't work. For me, they just take as long as they're going to take. I can't say that I can mix a song in 5 hours or a day or 2 days. There's no way I can do it. I can't guarantee it, because you might just get one thing and you might come up sounding really good right away and it's done. And then you get to another track and for some reason you just can't get what you want out of it.
Wardenclyffe Tower strikes me as an extension of Secrets. Do you consider that accurate?
Well, probably, because I think of each one of them as being an extension of the previous one, or something that grew out of the one before. Yeah, I guess so. I think it's quite different. I mean, I think it has a different, so I think it's actually a little, I found it a little less aggressive in a way, which I don't think I'm not sure that that's a good thing or not. It's just the way it turned out, But I'm already working on stuff for the next album. Obviously, the problem, like I said, with Wardenclyffe Tower was the amount of time between recording it and releasing it. And I like to get them so that they're fairly quick. Usually, once we started recording something, then I'll work on it until it's mixed and then it's out. So there's not a huge amount of time difference between when it was recorded and when it actually comes out. But now that I think about it, that happened on Secrets as well. I think I got involved in about 2 other projects at the same time, and I wasn't able to finish it when I wanted to, so that got delayed as well. I don't know, it's hard for me to say, to compare them. I just see them as they sound different, and the music's different. I mean, hopefully they have something that's the same about them, like the thread of evidence of one kind of mind or something.
I understand on all of your albums, your goal is to make them sound as live as possible.
I try, even if we end up overdubbing things, I always work really hard on making it sound, because sometimes you can overdub something and it might be correct, but it just might not feel right because it didn't happen at the same time. So sometimes I'll work really hard on, even if it's not exactly what I wanted, but to make it sound like it belongs in there, so if somebody perceives that and says that, oh, they heard, it sounds like it, has a more live feel, then that's good, I think that's a good thing.
Tell me about the title Wardenclyffe Tower and your fascination with Nicola Tesla.
Well, the thing was that I was always intrigued with him, and I had a big book about, with his patents and everything, and he just seemed to be, a guy that was doing things, being really creative at a time that didn't seem like it was quite the right time or something for him to be doing what he was doing. and although what he did contributed to everyone, and everybody benefited from it, not too many people actually know that he was responsible for all the things that he did. And, well, there was just something, when I started working on that track, Wardenclyffe Tower, I had this idea of, like I could just see this guy in his workshop, and, so when I'd finished that particular piece, I thought, well, that'd be a good title for the whole record, so that's basically what I did. I quite often start with an idea about something that I have, and then I'll work on that. But that particular piece, no, it was definitely a concept that I had, and I was trying to somehow just create an imaginary backdrop for this guy.
Tell me how you go about reflecting a story in music without lyrics.
it's only perceived, obviously, I can only see it through my own eyes and ears, really, because I just have to hope that whatever it is that I visualize is somehow, can somehow put the same pictures or even different pictures, but something that means the same thing in someone else's mind. And I usually just, if I see something, that's why I always wanted to be involved in working with film music, because when I see something, I quite often hear something at the same time. And then, so it's just a matter of putting it together. That's why I think, like I was saying, it's almost like I'm doing an imaginary film thing. And I think all my music's kind of like that. They're almost like imaginary film things. Not so much the solo aspect of it, because that takes on another realm. That goes into another thing, and that's like, again, trying to be like creative in an improvising way, like with jazz music or whatever. But I mean, the actual compositions quite often come from like pictures that I see in my head, So I would just think about what I knew about Nicola Tesla, which is obviously not that much, and just try and visualize something, and then put the music to the picture that I see, and that's basically what I did.
As you said, Tesla contributed to the world as a whole and sold the rights to inventions for meager sums and received relatively little recognition. Do you see any parallels between his career and yours?
Well, it's possible. It's just that I wasn't thinking about it like that. I wasn't using it as something where I could say, oh, well, look, I'm doing something and nobody's taking any notice. It wasn't like that at all. It just happened to be some sort of a coincidence, because I wasn't concerned with myself, really. I was just trying to, like I say, write some music based around what my imagination was doing with regard to Nikola Tesla.
Steve Hunt plays a larger role on keyboards on Wardenclyffe Tower than on Secrets. I presume that's related to you shifting away from the SynthAxe.
Yeah. Well, in actual fact, I think it was that he was involved a lot less on Secrets than... I think it depends on how long somebody's been around in the band, because a lot of the music I'd done, and I was using the SynthAxe a lot more on Secrets. So obviously, when I do that, it's almost like it almost negates the role for the keyboard player, because he's going to be doing something similar with the textures or whatever. Because if I've got guitar and then you say, okay, well, now I'll just add some keyboard chords, we'll get Steve to play on it, just to add some more different colors to it. Then with the SynthAxe, I was able to do that on my own, and I guess that's basically what happened. And this last one, I didn't play the SynthAxe very much. I only used it on 2 tracks, I think.
Why did you decide to focus so much less on SynthAxe for the new album?
Well, because I was afraid that I was getting too... There's a number of reasons, actually, but the most important one was that I was getting to a point where... There was a point, anyway, at least one time, where I was thinking of considering giving up playing the guitar altogether and just playing the SynthAxe, because I actually thought that it was closer. I could get closer to what I wanted to do, musically, in my head, sonically, the whole thing, with the SynthAxe than I could with the guitar, just simply because, I could use it as a wind instrument, like I used to use it with a breath controller. I could turn it into the wind instrument that I always wanted to play since being a kid. And I didn't have to deal with distortion or trying to take something like a distorted guitar sound and make it into something musical, which is a real challenge, I think. I mean, it's been one of the problems that I have all the time with the guitar, is that I want to try and make the guitar sound more like a horn, but at the same time, the fact that you have to use any kind of distortion to get sustain is a kind of catch-22 in itself, because you have to use something you don't want to use to get something that you want to use. Whereas with the SynthAxe, I didn't have any of those problems. It was just like really clear and really easy, and the fact that it had the keys on it as well as the strings was, that was a stroke of genius for me, with the inventor of that particular instrument. But what I got afraid of was this, I tried to keep in contact with them, about any future things that they wanted to, implement, and ideas that I had about how it needed to be modified or improved upon. And the barrier just broke down until in the end that there was right as it is right at this moment, they don't exist at all. And there's maybe 2 or 3 guys on the whole planet that could probably fix one. It got to be a really dangerous position to be in, because if I quit playing guitar and just got rid of them all and just started playing the SynthAxe, then I would be in real bad shape right now. About 2 months ago, I sold both of my SynthAxes, and then over the last few weeks, I started to realize that I really miss it, and I hooked up with this guy who bought one, never uses it, I guess he inherited some money and he went and spent it on the SynthAxe, then he decided that he didn't want to, didn't use it, so he knew that I was, played the SynthAxe, so he called me up, he tracked me down, and he offered to sell it to me, so I borrowed it from him to try it, and there was two bad frets on the neck, so I called up SynthAxe and, not SynthAxe because they don't exist really, but some of the people that used to work there, to try and find out what the possibility is for me to, if I were to buy this thing from him, if I could get this particular malfunction going again. And I'm still not sure. I'm still waiting to hear from one of the tech guys as to what the problem might be. So, see, that would be a scary position to be in if that was the only instrument I played. And the lack of support just simply boiled down to the fact that there was so few people playing it. It was a complete disaster for the company. There was no way they could continue to make them. Even though I still believe it, and I know it to be true in my heart, it's the only one. It's the only guitar synthesizer ever built that really works for me. It's just that, unfortunately, it behaves so much unlike a guitar that most guitar players don't want to deal with it. They don't want to get past that little threshold that you have to jump over to get into it. Because most guitar players, when they get a synth, it's a generalization, of course, not everyone, but they just pick one up immediately and start trying to make it. First of all, they want you to get some kind of a guitar sound, and then have them play the synthesizer playing a guitar sound, which is completely insane to me. I can't think of anything more ridiculous. The whole idea for me was to get outside the realm of guitar and start doing all this other stuff. But I think that might be just a thing that's true of guitar players. I think guitar players in general are really narrow as far as just looking at an instrument. A lot of players don't even listen to other instruments. They get so wrapped up in the guitar. I know that to be true because of the amount of guitar players that I know that are like that. It's like sometimes they don't hear the music, they only hear the sound, So anyway, that's where it is with the SynthAxe at the moment. So that's why I stopped using it less. And I tried to work with a new synthesizer controller that's made by a guy down here, Harvey Starr. But the potential of this one is huge as well. It's a really strange thing. It's almost like a cross between a keyboard and a guitar. You lay it flat, like a pedal steel, and it has 12 strings, but they're not really strings at all. They're keys. They're groups of 24 keys times 12. So it looks like a typewriter. But the problem for me is that obviously played that way. My left hand is upside down, and I've never really been able to use my right hand. So it's like learning to play a whole new instrument. Whereas the SynthAxe, I just fell right into it right away, you know. So I don't think it's going to be a substitution for me. Not that it couldn't be for someone else.
Do you feel like there's a limit on your creative potential with conventional guitar?
Oh yeah, you know, the way that I could make a note loud and then soft and then loud and then soft, just with one note. I mean, that's completely impossible on guitar. I mean, sure, you could use a volume pedal, but it's not the sound that it's not the way I want to hear it. You know, like if you play a violin and you pull a note on the violin, and then you can make it soft, and then you can add the vibrato, and you can take some off, and then you can make the note bright again and hard. You know, just one note. Just the way you can shape notes is like, you can shape notes on guitar, because I've worked really hard on doing that, but it's very limited compared to, you know, what I could do with a SynthAxe for me. But one, you know, the perception of it from someone else's point of view is not the same as it is from my point of view. Someone else will just hear what they hear. But as being the guy who's trying to create the music, I know that instrument works. You know, it worked for me. So it's kind of sad that it's ended, you know. I'm going to try all I can to see if I can get this one particular SynthAxe going, and then over a period of the next few years I might try and see if I can round up a few more used ones, you know. So I should never have sold the ones. It was a big mistake, because I had two, and I bought the second one quite a number of years after the first one, just so that I'd have a spare, and each one of them had a spare console, because the consoles were the thing that had most of a lot of the memory stuff was in there, so, and they did fail from time to time, so it was good to have a spare one with each.
Let's explore your solo piece Oniric Moor from Wardenclyffe Tower and its improvised origins.
That was just an improvisation with two parts. I played one part. Actually, I just recorded 10 or 15 minutes of improvisation, and I just listened to them, and I picked one that I liked, and then I just played another part along with it spontaneously, and that was that piece. So the idea that I had for the album wasn't going to be so much spontaneous, you know. I was actually going to use the composition, and also use all these big guitars that I've got at the moment. I've been experimenting with extending the range of the guitar. You know, I've got a little piccolo one and 3 baritone guitars.
What attracts you to baritone guitars?
Well, what it is it's extremely, if you know, the difference between a bass guitar and a guitar is, a bass guitar is actually much smaller for the notes it produces than a guitar is for the notes that it produces, I mean, physically. So the baritone guitars for me, are extremely long scale. They're like 2 to 4 inches longer than the biggest bass guitar, and one is a 36-inch scale and the other one is a 38-inch scale. And what it is it's like if you could imagine a normal guitar, and then you just extended the neck downwards from that note E, from the lowest note. So in other words, that when you play an E on it, on the baritone guitar, the string will be the same length as it is as an E on the regular guitar. Because I didn't want it to sound like a bass guitar. I wanted it to sound like guitar, but just extended the range. And that's exactly what it sounds like. Having a really long string like that, it has all these overtones and harmonics in it, and obviously I use the same gauge strings because you're just taking that scale and making it longer. It's not like you're trying to take a short scale and tune the notes down low, you know, by putting on a thick string or something. This is just basically using the same concept as the 25.5-inch scale guitar, just extended downward. It gives me more range out, it's just extended the range just a little outside normal for guitar, that's all. That's all I could get from it, really. And they're very difficult to play. The biggest one is anyway, because the first fret is almost 2 inch. It's not the easiest thing to get around, but it sounds so good, it's worth it. They really have a good sound. I mean, I used one, I played a solo on one on the, actually I used a couple of them. I used the B-flat one on the Sphere of Innocence, the guitar solo on there. It goes down low. That whole solo is the baritone guitar. And I used the short baritone guitar, which only goes down to C on Zarabeth. That one's actually quite playable because it's only, it's only a few inches longer than a regular guitar, so you can hear a difference in the sound at the bottom of the instrument, but it doesn't feel really, it's not reached the point of uncomfortableness to play, so that's a usable instrument.
I understand you feel your ability to progress as a guitarist has significantly increased in recent years. Why do you feel that's the case?
Over the last few years, anyway, that I've made, it seems like I make more progress with each, over a period of a year, more than I did over, 3 or 4 years, a few years ago. Just because it seems like the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know, and it just cascades. But so long as I can make some kind of progress, even if it's just a small amount, then it's worth it, because, progress for me, obviously the music is separate. What I was talking about is my own playing, like soloing and stuff. But as for the music, I think I'm more enjoying writing tunes now than before. It seems to be getting more difficult, but at the same time the tunes seem to be more satisfying when I finish, when I actually get to the end of one. I just keep going. It's hard to talk about it, it's just something that you just keep trying to do.
What do you make of the gulf between the critical acclaim you experience versus the relatively modest record sales that result?
I really don't give it too much thought, really, because ultimately the person who's involved in it is the person who actually knows. So if somebody says, it's like someone coming up to me after a bad gig and saying, oh, we thought you were great, whatever. I mean, I really think it's wonderful that people like it, and I'm really moved by the fact that people like it. I think, geez, that's really great. But it doesn't change anything for me. It doesn't make me feel any different about what I'm doing or anything, because I know what it is that I'm trying to do, and so I don't really worry about it too much. But on the other side of it is it can be frustrating sometimes, but it's no more frustrating for me than it is for a lot of other people. When you try to do something that doesn't have really an outlet, I don't see it as being anybody's fault but the media, really. I think, but that most people suffer from that. Unless you're involved in something really mainstream or something that gets played on the radio, you're going to run into that problem because the media is the controlling factor. No one can ever hear anything. Then there's no way that you could, convince somebody or even get them to. I mean, if you've never tasted an orange, you'd never know if you liked one. I see it like that. And with the radio stations and the record companies are not interested in really signing people because of musical reasons. They just want something that they can sell a lot of. It's the same throughout the world. It's like, how far do you have to go to find a really cool little French restaurant, but you can find a McDonald's on every street corner. It's the same thing. It unfortunately makes it it's becoming more and more difficult for the little guys to keep going, but I think it's worth it. As long as you do what you believe in, I just couldn't see any other way to do it. I mean, it wouldn't feel right for me to do something else. I'd just say, well, why am I doing this? So, and because I started out in music as an accident, and a lot of people come into music deliberately, and they think, hopefully one day I'm going to become a professional musician, meaning to themselves that they could make make money from doing it. Whereas when I came into it, I didn't. It was just something that I did as a hobby, something I did for myself. And the fact that I ended up being a professional musician was a complete accident. I mean, it wasn't a deliberate attempt to do it. It just happened. All I was doing was the same thing as I never did anything for any other reason than a selfish reason, which was just to do something that made me happy, or it tried to give me something that I could do with my life, so, and it's the same now, and I think that's why I'd rather would get a job outside, maybe still involved in music in one way or another, but do another job rather than play the kind of music that I didn't have any interest in, because that would be completely pointless.
Does music pay the bills effectively for you?
It does, but it's really difficult, and seems to get harder and harder, and I've got more concert, like having a family, it just becomes more and more difficult.
You mentioned possibly seeking work beyond the realms of recording and performing music. I'm curious what you'd pursue.
Well, I'm looking into the possibility of what there is that I can do because I can't, I just don't see the way things are right now. That first of all, if I lose the desire, it comes and goes in waves, and they take about 6 months for them to go up and down now. But I can go through a wave of at least 6 months of just feeling like I don't want to deal with it anymore, and then I'll come out of it, and then I'll start to get enthused again, and it's not so much about being enthused about what I want to do. I know what I want to do for myself. It's just that it just seems to be getting harder and harder to survive doing it, So then it just makes me think about, well, what else can I do? I mean, what am I going to do? Because I have to think about it. So I'm just in the process of trying to, filter it down in my head as to what the possibilities might be. I could get involved with a manufacturer, perhaps, a musical instrument manufacturer, or I could just simply go and get a job at McDonald's. I don't know. I'd rather not, but I could, I'd look to that first would be to try and get involved in a company, a manufacturing company, or an electronics company, something that did something that I liked.
I understand bootlegs are the bane of your existence and that you're thinking about combating them with your own live releases.
We're thinking of releasing an official bootleg record because there's so many bootlegs out there. We figured that, we might as well at least give the guys in the band a choice of what nights they thought it was okay as against the ones that it wasn't, So Gary Husband would record all the gigs from with his DAT player. And some of them are pretty good. I mean, they're obviously they're live. That's the thing that I like about them is they're not like those studio live things. In other words, that you get supposedly a live album that sounds like the worst studio recording you ever heard in your life. That is definitely something that I want to avoid. So, in fact, the microphone at the back of the room way seems to be a good way to go to me because they always sound. You definitely get that feeling of a live performance. From now on, I think over the next year, we're just going to keep carrying DAT machines around and recording gigs. And I was thinking of actually maybe trying to get one of those 8-track DAT machines and put in, 2 tracks that are recorded in the room with the DAT mic at the back, and then 2 tracks that are just focused on each particular instrument. So there's a slight balancing thing that you can add to the overall room tape, to the room sound, but we'll try.
What's your perspective on the fact that actual record labels sometimes bootleg your music?
I have to tell you, that is the single most frustrating thing for me. To not be able to be in a situation where you can't get a record deal because for some reason or other they won't go to the trouble to sign you up because it's, for whatever reason. But the same people will take complete advantage of you by, bootlegging things or putting out another album, Sony just did that with that old Velvet Darkness album. They re-released it, but unfortunately, is that I wasn't able to stop them right away, but they stopped them eventually. and they're not going to make that album anymore because that whole project was a rip-off in the first place. So to have it re-released now and packaged like a new album, so those kind of things they make me go crazy. You know, I like want to tear my hair out. It was no good. It was never any good. It was from the way it was recorded, what happened to the musicians, the whole thing. It was a complete disaster. It was not even. It was terrible at that time, and that makes it terrible today. You know, never any good. I mean, it's one thing to say, okay, I'll look back to that old IOU album and say, well, it sounds pretty old, you know, and I may maybe not like it as much as the new stuff, but the fact was that it was what it is then, and it was okay then, and everybody accepted that to be the fact at that time. But that was not true of Velvet Darkness. That album was never fit to be released, you know, because nobody got to hear anything that they did. You know, I never got a tape of anything that was recorded, and we were actually rehearsing in the studio, and they were rolling the tape while we were rehearsing, on the premise that we were going to be able to, you know, just keep recording and also, you know, like check things out. But it never happened. At the end of that day, the guy just says, "Oh, well, thanks, see ya." That's why a lot of those tunes don't have any endings, because they were rehearsals. So that was complete rip-off. They didn't have a contract. They didn't have any publishing. They didn't have the rights to anything. That happens all the time. And there's bootlegs all over the place, and they're exactly the same. But now that it's owned by a big label, they had to produce all the paperwork, and they couldn't. So that's how we got them. So I have to say that is the most frustrating thing of all. To be in a position where you're trying to survive and you're trying to keep some quality, you know, and you're trying to, you know, be true to like what you believe in is good, you know, and trying to get deals, you know, a record deal, and then to have people do that kind of stuff is pretty low, you know, because the unfortunate thing is they take advantage of the fact that there is people out there that will buy it, and plus they know that we're so small that we'll never be able to do anything about it to stop them. If we were big, you know, nobody could ever do that to Madonna or Michael Jackson, because the record company would just crucify whoever it was. There's no way they could ever do that. But when you're in a little Mickey Mouse situation like we are, you know, when you're right in that, you're just in enough so that you can make somebody some money. You don't make enough money to be able to stop somebody from stealing stuff from you. It's my biggest nightmare.
I'd like to name some groups you've been involved with and have you tell me the first thing that comes to mind. Let's start with Soft Machine.
Oh, I like that band. It was a good experience. I liked all the musicians, and I was free to do, you know, what I was doing at that time within that framework, and I enjoyed that band a great deal.
All right, next up is UK.
Nice chaps and everything, but a very miserable experience. It had a lot of potential, you know, and I guess the band originally was you know, John Wetton, Eddie Jobson, and Bill without myself, and they were looking for a guitar player, and Bill, I just started playing with Bill, so he said, "Oh, you know, there's this guitar player playing on my album, you want to check him out?" So they had me over, and then they said, "Yeah, this might work, you know, let's give it a go." So then they decided to form this band, came up with a name, and it was really good guys, you know, got on pretty good with all of them. I think it was, what went wrong was the fact that everybody wanted to do something else, you know. I mean, I think there was two factions in the band. There was like Bill and myself and Eddie and John, and they were kind of at war, you know, really. It was, so that's what made it miserable, you know. They wanted me to play the same solos every night, and it was a completely alien thing. You know, I mean, I would have probably been better able to adapt to that now than I was then. Now I could have said maybe, well, I know what I want to do, but this is what this is, you know. But you can never do that, you know. So at the time, I remember I was going nuts, you know. I mean, I enjoyed making the album, and it was good. That was great. It was just that it got to be really not too much fun on the road. It was a purely musical. I mean, for me, I don't know. I mean, all the other guys in the band might hate me. I don't know. But it wasn't that for me. It was just a musical thing. It was just like, geez, what am I doing here? It was one of those. It wasn't that I didn't like the people. I did. I really liked all of those guys, even though they might not realize that. I do. I never. It was never that for me. It was just this purely and simply a musical problem.
What about the band Bruford? What was that like for you?
I enjoyed that too. I liked working with Bill. I mean, it did have some of the carry-on things over from UK, but the thing was that if I hadn't have had that bee in my bonnet about wanting to do my own thing, I would have probably stayed there. I enjoyed working with Bill.
And that brings us to Tony Williams' Lifetime.
Oh, that was great. It was kind of we had some rough times. I mean, making it work, but it was a great experience. I enjoyed every minute of it.
Up next is Gong.
Gong was good too. It was good fun. I didn't speak French, and they were always arguing in French, so I never knew what the hell they were arguing about. But I think the band had a lot of potential, but it was just never. It was just never reached. Espresso 1 was actually the one that I played on. In England, Espresso 1 was called Gazeuse, and I think that was the best one. I think that was the best record that they did. I mean, I listened to it just recently because they re-released that on CD, and I thought I sounded terrible on it, but the band sounded good, and it still sounded pretty fresh, and especially the drums. Pierre to me sounded great. It could have been done yesterday. So that says a lot about his drumming.
Okay, here's one you probably weren't expecting. What about Sunship?
What's that?
That was a band you were in with Jamie Muir, Alan Gowan, Laurie Baker, around 71.
Oh, is that what it was called? Oh, yeah, that was good fun. That was good fun too. It was real different than what I was wanting to do at the time, but it was, as far as I remember, it was pretty open. I think it was pretty much almost spontaneous music. It was like a combination of, it was just those people improvising, really. So it wasn't really like anything else, I don't think. It was just a combination of those particular people. I think we might have done a couple of gigs, but as far as I remember, the most I remember about that band was just rehearsing, going around to one of the guys' houses to play, I miss Alan, even though I never, I didn't really stay in contact with him, but, I liked Alan Gowan a lot, and I think he died from leukemia, I think, quite a while ago, and that was really sad.
Now, you've got 3 young kids. I'm curious if you'd like to see them involved in music.
Well, if they want to be. I mean, I'm not encouraging any of them, really. I'm not trying to keep them away from it. I'm not going to push them one way or the other. I'm just going to let them see. Obviously, if I see some spark and I can see somebody looks like they might be able to do something, then I'm going to help them.
Do your kids appreciate your work?
No, I don't think they like it very much. Every time I bring something in to check out a mix or anything, they go, "Oh, turn that off, Dad." So I don't think they do. It was great though the other day because a friend of mine came around with his son who plays guitar, and he's just like 13, I think, and it was quite fascinating for them, for my kids, because he turns out that he's a big fan. So when Sam, my son, asked him, "Who do you like?" then, and he said, "Well, I like your dad." So that was really strange. I think it was the first time anybody had, pretty wild.
Well, listen, it's really been a pleasure.
Yeah, well, likewise. Thanks a lot.